Whoa, I cried. I felt like I was home. I didn't know where to go. Then a really nice teacher guided me to the right classroom. It was the right classroom indeed. It was room 12, Mrs. Kim and Mrs. Ingham's room. I was really scared when I went into room 12. I was the only new student in the class. Fortunately, I had two really nice and smart teachers. I knew they were the best second grade teachers you could ever have. They taught me wonderful things. For example, they taught me how to add and subtract numbers without using my fingers. They also taught me how to write long all-abouts. But suddenly, Mrs. Kim was pregnant, so she was out of teaching for months. I was sad, but a kind teacher named Miss Sampson replaced Mrs. Kim. I will always remember when Mrs. Kim came to visit and gave orange, cherry, and grape ice pops to us. But the best part of second grade was when I met my best friend, who was still my best friend. He has been my best friend for 3 years. That would be Robert Rolda. Man, I don't know where to start. Robert has always been the king of all my best friends. He always looks out for me, and I always look out for him. He made me interested in soccer, and I made him interested in video games. The very best thing about Robert is that no matter how bad a situation gets, we know that we will always be best friends. I was excited when I moved on to 3rd grade. I still remember walking around in my room in circles thinking about who would be my 3rd grade teacher or teachers. On the first day of 3rd grade, I still didn't know who my teacher would be. Luckily, Mrs. Bush found out that I was in Mrs. Greenfield's and Mrs. Kaczynski's class. I didn't even say anything. I zoomed into room 24 and I started off a fresh year. No doubt, 3rd grade was an awesome year for me for 3 reasons. For one thing, I had not only one but 2 intelligent teachers, Mrs. Greenfield and Mrs. Kaczynski. Taught me many things, such as multiplication, using computers for writing, and a lot more. Another thing was that my best friend Robert was in my class. The 3rd thing was that after all, it was Conley Road School for Joey's sake. When my mom told me that Mrs. Ladd and Mrs. Haddock would be my 4th grade teachers, I jumped up with pride. Mrs. Ladd was the teacher of the year series last year, and Mrs. Haddock is definitely a really smart teacher. Plus, 2 teachers are better than 1. Not only was I proud and excited to have Mrs. Ladd and Mrs. Haddock as my teachers, it was so awesome to be able to go to Conley Road School for 1 more year. When I walked into my classroom on the first day of 4th grade, I saw a few people from my class last year and lots of students from the other 3rd grade classes from last year. I was a little worried, but then I saw Robert in my class again. Anyway, Mrs. Ladd and Mrs. Haddock were awesome teachers. They made us write amazing stories, they read us awesome books, and if we were lucky, they will show us the movie version of the books. They also let us have some free time on Fridays. See, I told you it was an amazing year. But let's not forget about my math and science teacher, Mrs. Pantry. This is the first time ever that 4th graders got to switch teachers at different times. It was a success. Not only was it a great success, it got us used to switching classes for middle school and high school. Anyway, Mrs. Pantry was a teacher who made us always do our best, and boy did it work. Also, Mrs. Pantry let us play math games on the computer to help us learn. That was nice. Mrs. Pantry taught me a lot of new things this year, like division and math strategies that I didn't even know about. She also taught me science stuff that blows me away. Mrs. Haddock helped teach math and science too. She also helped a lot with writing. Imagine doing all of that. Now let's talk about what's happening today. Today is the last day of not only 4th grade, but our last day of Conley Road School. I will always remember not only the teachers, not only being my best friend Robert, but all of you guys and girls. So before I end my speech, I am just going to say happy graduation to all the 4th graders. Yeah.
Let's have another round of applause for all of our